Hello class, I've prepared this short demo today for students so that we can kind of work on some basic observation, cross-hatching, and understanding of how to model things in the round. By that which I mean I've got this styrofoam ball here, and right now the lighting on it is quite even, so you've got like multiple shadows getting cast here, and then on the ball itself you don't really see that much uh, shading that defines it as a round object. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna change the lighting so that it's more directional. It's coming from only one source, and then you're gonna see this shadow relationship. And I'm also going to do a demo on cross-hatching, which is going to lead us into the next assignment. Okay, so turn off my big light. Now you really see how how light really works, because when during the day, if a person's outside or there's there's light hitting something from every direction, or even inside where if you have lights all across the room, then it's harder to see these relationships. But if you have light coming from one source, I've got a lamp up there, and it's coming down, and it's striking this area, and that's the highlight. And then right here is the shadow, and you see underneath you have a cast shadow, and you also have this reflected light. So this spot is brighter than this spot, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a photo of this, and I'm going to show you how I would draw as realistic a drawing of this composition with cross-hatching techniques. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the photo of the ball that's lit from one side over on the right over here, and then I'm going to I also have it on the monitor in front of me so I can see it, and what I'm going to do is very lightly rough in the ball. So this is a basic introductory exercise that probably thousands and thousands of art teachers have given to their students, and I really recommend that you follow along if you have not done cross-hatching, and if you have not done the classico shading, because this is really kind of critical to doing still lifes and to doing the figure, the portrait. This is shading 101. As far as drawing a circle, you just watch how I did that. I don't have a reference. Everybody has in their head. I mean, I do have the photo of the ball in front of me, but I was not looking at it. I think that everybody has in their head an idea of what a circle looks like. And drawing a circle from your imagination just takes a little bit of practice, but you kind of know that there are no flat points, and there's no flat edges, and there's no points. So you just lightly keep roughing edges. If there's one part that looks fatter than another part, you just keep lightly roughing it in until it becomes even, and maybe even turning it sideways. I'm not going to do it right now because my book is perfectly positioned under the camera, and I don't want to mess with that. But lightly turning the books upside down or sideways might give you a different perspective on if one part is fatter or flatter than another part. So that's more or less, this is more or less pretty round, okay? What I will do next is take my eraser. If I had my kneadable eraser in front of me right now, I would probably use it, but I cannot say where I stuck it this time. No. All right, I'm just going to go ahead with using my white eraser. Okay, and gently get rid of some of this extra stuff, the construction line, especially on this side because the highlight is going to be here. So I don't want to have very much edge at all. Try not to use your fingers too much to blow these things away, because if there's a lot of graphite, then like right here, you'd smudge it and it just gets messier. So you try to use a brush or your breath to get rid of eraser bits, or if you use your kneadable eraser, which doesn't make eraser bits, then it keeps your drawing clean. The other thing, what some people do is they keep a piece of paper underneath their hand, just a piece of scrap paper. I'm going to grab one right out of my printer right here. Okay, keeping a piece of scrap paper under your hand also is a great technique. I learned that in high school. I'll fold this in half. And if you go like this, then your hand won't smudge the drawing. Your hand doesn't get dirty. Keeps your drawing nice and clean. Okay, so next thing is we are going to define, I'm going to rough in very lightly where the cast shadow is going to go. So you see how I'm holding the pencil, my pencil really far up. I just find this makes it easier sometimes to draw larger areas. It's just like, as opposed to right here, if I go like this, it's just a personal habit that I've developed. So you're drawing an ellipse right here. And you're really studying the thing that you're referencing. So this ellipse is not straight sideways, it's actually tilted, right? So you really study it, and it's tilted. So this is the bottom of my sphere, and I'm going to eyeball that the shadow starts right about here or so, and it curves out and swoops down. That's a little darker than I wanted it. So if you always try to draw really light when you're trying to find where something goes, draw really, really light pressure, and then you don't have to do as much erasing. It's really critical at this, in the early stage of a drawing. Okay, looks like my shadow is actually going to overlap onto the next page, and that is fine. I actually have a lot of sketchbook drawings where the drawing overlaps, because I actually really like using this, the entire, both sides, as my kind of extended canvas. Okay, so that looks sort of correct, but I have to, I got an eyeball or measure, is this going out far enough? And one way I can do that is if if you've ever seen a cartoon of an artist holding up a paintbrush to their work, then or to their subject, but with their arm completely extended. So it's a little bit difficult to demonstrate here, but you're basically, if you have your reference image and you're comparing the height of the ball versus the height of the ball versus the width of the shadow. So what I'm going to do is I'm sticking my pencil up again to my monitor, which you can't see right now, and I'm placing this visually up at the top of my drawing, or my ball, and then my thumb at the bottom. So I'm kind of moving my thumb until it lines up with the bottom, so that this is the height of the ball, and I turn it sideways without extending my arm or retracting it. So, and then I compare that measurement that I've created to the width of the shadow, and I'm going to do that right now. And it looks like this dimension is the same as the measurement from the tip of the shadow to the base of the sphere, not here, because that's wider. So if I go like this, and it kind of lines up from the top to the top of the H, and I go like this. It's pretty much bang on, so I'm going to go with that. It's close enough. Okay, and then now we're going to get into the cross hatching. You have the light is coming from this direction. Okay. And it's hitting here. You have this highlight that comes across here, and then this surface right here is where the light is passing across, and it's not hitting it. It's passing across it, and it's continuing, and then it's hitting the table and bouncing everywhere, all over the place, and some of it bounces back into this area, creating the reflected light. So this area is going to be slightly lighter in tone than here, but then it's also darker than here because it's reflected light. When that reflected light tries to jump back up, because this shadow area once again is not perpendicular to where the light is trying to bounce, so that reflected light does not light up the shadow area. Okay, so that's pretty critical stuff. And then even within the cast shadow, there's some variation where it's darker here and a little bit lighter here, because actually way over to the right hand side I have a window, and it's getting a little bit dark, but there is some light coming from the side, so that's why there's kind of two different shadows going on in here. So what I'm going to do is start shading, and because I'm right-handed, it's very natural for me to make this motion. But if you're following along, and I hope you are, because this is a critical exercise for everything that passes, that's going to continue from this point on. When I do shading like this with my right hand, it's very natural for me to make this motion. But if you're left-handed, it's harder. So you'd have to turn your book, or you'd have to draw it flipped with the light coming this way, because for a left-handed person, it's natural to make this motion. Okay, so this is what I'm doing. I am shading. This is cross-hatching. You're making layers of parallel lines, and they create shadow, they create depth, but they also, because they have this curve, they shape the drawing from a flat thing into a illusion of 3 dimensions. So these lines describe the curve. It's really critical here. Now, of course, on a sphere, those curves are going in every direction, but we're describing the curve as far as how the light passes across it and then bounces back. And when you squint at your subject, the ball, you're looking at what are the darkest parts and what are the lightest parts. So the darkest parts are here, but everything below this point is in some amount of shadow. So it's safe to shade in the entire thing. Okay? But the darkest parts are right here. But does that dark part have a sharp edge or a soft edge? What generally happens is there's a soft edge on the side where it meets the reflected light. It's otherwise known as a gradient. It just sort of feathers into that reflected light area right here. And then on the highlight, it's also soft, but the tone changes more drastically. So darkest here, medium, highlight, whereas down here the gradient is more gradual between those different tones. When I squint and I look into this light area, is it all white or does it have some gray in it too? So it does have some gray in it. The highlight is really right here. And then everything else has a little bit of gray to it. Right, so I could definitely keep fiddling with it, but that's the basic idea of cross-hatching. And those lines don't have to go all in the same direction. You can kind of go like this and like that. And if you find that some certain areas are getting too dark, then you can take a kneadable eraser, which I don't know where mine is right now, but so I'm going to just gently bring that back a little bit. So if you press too hard with a white eraser, you'll just take off way too much. So I'll gently bring that back. See how much I picked up here? And then it's going to be a little bit lighter. So you just keep checking your reference of your subject and go, is this area too dark or is this area too light? And what you are training is your observation skills. The actual physical art of drawing, moving your hand around, is secondary. The key thing is observing and understanding things, visual relationships. That is an essential part of drawing. So actually most of the act of drawing takes place between the eye and the brain, and the hand is not actually involved. So that being said, theoretically, if you had no hands, if they were amputated, but you could draw with another part of your body, like your foot, you could still, even though it would be difficult, but if you understood what you were drawing, you could still do it without your hand, because the primary part of drawing well is understanding relationships, visual relationships. All right. So next step, I am going to shade, and I'm going to go this way. I'm going to shade, fill in the cast shadow. What I don't want to see is a ellipse around right here, which I do have one to start off so that I define what I'm shading, but I don't want a heavy line at the end, because there isn't a heavy line around anything in the world. And we're going for, in this exercise, for realism. So you want to minimize that line at the end. So you kind of shade up to it so that it disappears. And if it's too heavy, or like right here, then I'm going to erase that edge. So this cast shadow is darkest right down here. You have to really, really analyze your subject and go, okay, what parts are too dark and what parts are too light? And like I said, because I have two different shadows going on in this area, I have, they're kind of overlapping like this. I have a shadow here that's being cast by the light, and then a shadow like here that's cast by the window, so to my right. So that's why I have there's kind of like this curve right here. So another thing I would point out at this point is that the edge of the shadow, where it's closest to the object, happens to be sharper right here, and it's a softer edge here. So you can do that too. So first I'm going to really make this punchy black. Okay, so as dark as it needs to be, and make the edge really sharp. And that's just going to help this object pop off the surface visually. You want to make it look so realistic that you can reach into the page and pick it up. And then right here where it comes up to the edge, it's a not super sharp, but it's sharper than here, so I lessen the amount of pressure. So I reduce how much pressure is here, and I go a little bit lighter as I'm feathering the edge. And going side to side, the reason I chose side to side is it helps emphasize the flatness of the surface that it's sitting on, which is the table. And if you keep your marks all going in the same direction, then it kind of provides less visual distraction, and it tells the viewer this is a flat surface that the object is sitting on. And I'm just going to go over this area to fill in all these little voids. There's these little white gaps, and I just lightly go over it over and over and over and over until they're all filled, because they're distracting and there are no little white gaps between lines or between shading in my reference, so I don't want to include any here. This is a little tricky to fill in right in the crease, but I can do it. And as I said, right here I am softening that edge. And I'm taking a little bit of extra time to deal with this edge and make it dark and sharp. But I'm not putting a heavy line there. The tone, like how dark this is, kind of, it goes from mid-tone gray to darker gray to dark to as dark as I can make it, but I don't put a heavy line there because the heavy lines just jump straight out. So the tone should just fade right into as dark as I need it to go. And I can continue trying to make that edge sharp. But you notice in the reference picture that this part of the ball is actually darker than this part of the shadow, right? So this is where it gets tricky. Even though you would think that drawing a ball is simple, but there's a lot of little subtle complexities. Okay. So right here, I'm going to make that edge a little bit sharper. And when you're doing this edge here, anytime you want to do a really sharp edge, you need to have a sharp pencil. Okay. So to make this softer, I'm just going to very, very lightly erase at it. Very, very lightly. And the recommended pencil for something like this is HB or even 2H, which I don't think is in your drawing kit, but the 2H is a lighter lead. It's for doing really light lines. Okay, now I'm taking a step back or taking a break and reevaluating what areas need more work. Okay, So I think I could do a little bit more shading here. And I could take my eraser and tighten that edge up. See how much, there's so much graphite here that if I don't put a piece of paper here, like I got a tiny bit of smudging here, but if I don't put a piece of paper here and I start doing this stuff, like tightening up this edge, I am definitely going to smudge it with my hand. See how, like, I turn my hand this way? You could turn the book, but I'm not going to because I don't want to mess up my shot. But I turn it this way and I really carefully tighten up that edge, and that is going to help make my object look more realistic. Okay, what else do I need to do? I think this whole dark area could be wider and have less texture. Okay, I'm about to wrap up this demo. Thank you for watching. I could fiddle with it and make some of this texture even softer, but that would be for a demo where I'm trying to go for photorealism. But I'm not going to eliminate all of it because part of this demo was talking about why we do cross-hatching, because it's really important for drawing the figure, for shading, because this technique has been used by millions of artists around the world. Primarily, at least in Western art history, we associate it with the masters in the Renaissance, but I'm sure people in other cultures also figured it out. Because all you're doing is just making systems of lines on top of each other that describe illusion and describe depth and describe light. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this. I really, really strongly recommend people practice this because so much of learning to draw is based in this one exercise. One last thing I want to point out is that you just take note that I have a super soft edge right here, and I think I probably mentioned that earlier. There's almost no lines here showing the edge. It's just the tone stops and then there's the void beyond that, and having that relationship where the tone for the positive space, the object just stops, approaches more realism than having a line going around it. Okay?